Media.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to News and Views right here on Salam Media. My name is Julie Ali, and we are now going to be joined by Gideon Chitanga. He is a research associate at the African Center for the Study of the U.S. at Wits University. Very good morning to you, Gideon. Welcome to the program, and nice talking with you once again.
Good morning, and good morning to the audience.
Okay, now Saudi Arabia showcased deepening ties with a series of strategic deals on the first day last week during a visit by President Xi Jinping, including one with the technical giant Huawei, whose growing foray into the Gulf region has raised U.S. security concerns. So, where are we with this issue? And we also know that King Salman signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with Xi Jinping. And obviously, he received a lavish welcome with Saudi Arabia in a country forging new global partnerships beyond the West. It's making the US jittery and perhaps the rest of the Western world?
Thank you. I think these are very important questions. It is important to understand that China is the biggest trading partner for Saudi Arabia. The second thing is that with respect to Huawei, the West has always raised the perceptions about suspicion of the Huawei technology, and they banned them. I am sure within the European Union and in the US. This is not, I think, a very surprising posture or suggestion that there would be security concern with respect to Saudi Arabia entering this relationship with Huawei and raising concerns in the West, because they have always had concerns, but also these concerns are just part of their general concerns about the growing influence of China in different parts of the world. And indeed, President Xi's visit to the Saudi for the West, for the US, is an issue of major concern, because in their perception, they are worried about growing influence of China, growing global influence. But that is it may. I think what is key is to see that there is a shift towards from global unilateralism or the single dominance of one power to more actors which are growing. And for me, this democratizes the multilateral relations and increases a sense of representative participation. Secondly, the economic engagements do not necessarily have to be aligned with one party or the other. The different countries can engage with different players to at least increase opportunities and maximize what they can get. So the concern about, again, the visit of President Xi to Saudi for the US is that Saudi has been their partner and a close partner of the US, and maybe Saudi now is choosing a side and is shifting towards China. I think for the Saudis, it's more about building or consolidating new relationships, viewing China as the largest consumer of oil and a growing market for prospective diversification of their economy. And China is increasingly interested in building these partnerships, which are economically more and mutually beneficial, and obviously opening new opportunities for global participation and creating new, more representatives partnerships which can elicit more benefits.
The US can't particularly be pleased about this new partnership and these bilateral trade discussions that Xi has had with Saudi Arabia. I should imagine that this display stood in stark contrast to the low-key welcome that was extended to Joe Biden in July of this year,
Mm.
with whom, as we all know, the ties have been strained by Saudi's energy policy and the 2018 murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
That's what,
That overshadowed that visit of Biden to Saudi Arabia. Subsequent to that visit, apparently, um, maybe there were a lot of heavy undertones during that visit, that when Biden went back to the States, they issued a statement to the effect that they have cleared MBS's involvement in the murder of Khashoggi. I should imagine that was an attempt at perhaps strengthening ties between the two countries.
what is very interesting is that yes, the US will always take a particular posture about human rights, but I think that the growing relations between Saudi Arabia and the US are beyond human rights issues. So they may have been concerns from Washington about the implication of such a high profile and publicly discussed the issue. But that still, with that situation, President Biden was able to go to Saudi Arabia and try to leverage his influence to sort of solicit, increase the production of oil. So I think that the political and economic interest, where the US is concerned, supersedes concerns about human rights, although the rhetoric will always be human rights and democracy. And indeed, the relations between the US and between Washington and Riyadh are deeply tied on security concerns, on economic concerns, on energy concerns more than human rights issues. If this same issue, the Khashoggi issue, had happened in any other country, where the political security and economic interests are probably marginal, it would have been such a crisis for Biden to visit. So I do not think that the Khashoggi issue, in terms of strict police concerns, it's really such a big issue. Of course, it's a public concern within certain circles, and seriously, some concerns would have been raised in the US itself. But we saw that still Biden went. We recall the first greeting, not so warm, but it was a
Yeah.
greeting. Yes, the the ceremony.
It was an elbow. It was an elbow greeting, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's an elbow greeting.
Mhm.
And we saw the ceremonies also that were conducted
Mm.
in when President Xi Jinping was visiting. I would not want to read too much into them. I think that for sure they illustrate the level of warmth, convergence. These are two countries which, to the point, share the political principles of non-intervention. The discussions were set to us to sign about 29 billion US dollars of potential investment. So this was quite huge, and their relationship has been evolving and growing. So I would not want to see the relationship in terms of competition against the US, but I would say this is an important growing relationship for the Saudis and for the GCC countries, for the Arab community. The multilateral institutionalism will always provide new opportunities and new relations. And I think a diversification of relations benefits different countries and different citizens.
Let's look at the issue around both China, Xi Jinping, and MBS have made these statements. Um, and it's a bit concerning because we know that Saudi Arabia have been accused over time for gross human rights violations against their own people, and of course their migrant workers as well. And obviously, China has the Uyghur situation hanging over their heads. And as we know, that the Uyghur Chinese are Muslims, and it should actually be of concern to the Saudis, but they seem they seem unperturbed by those issues because they both made a joint statement suggesting that China and Arab countries would, and I quote, continue to hold high the banner of non-interference in internal affairs. Xi said, and that sentiment was echoed by the prince, who said his country opposed any, and I quote again, interference in China's internal affairs in the name of human rights. So they've both covered their backs, have they not?
I think the issue about human rights is basically a response to partly to what we have mentioned, but also partly to the Khashoggi issue and broadly to how the issue of human rights has been intrusively used by the West, by the US, to monitor other countries or to try and hold them accountable without necessarily looking at the US itself and what it is doing. That's the first thing. And the second thing is when human rights are used opportunistically to undermine the sovereignty and the self-determination of other countries. A key issue that the many countries have raised about the duplicity of the West in terms of how it engages politically and policy-wise with countries where its interests are key. In the sense of the Saudis and China, the concerns that have been raised, I think that the major point to make is these countries think that they can address their internal contradictions within their own frameworks, including issues of human rights, which are very legitimate concerns.
Okay, let's wrap up by looking at the issue around the tech giant Huawei, whose growing foray into the Gulf region has raised US security concerns. Apart from their security concerns, during Trump's term in office, he shot Huawei down in the United States, did he not? And I'm wondering if that hasn't caused more disadvantage to the United States during that period where Trump, closed down Huawei in the United States. What do they gain by their very big presence now in Saudi Arabia?
Obviously, Huawei is a giant technology player. It's providing, I think, comparatively the cheapest technologies across the world. It's a huge player in rolling out 5G technologies in the Arab region. So to that extent, it's very competitive, and there are big tech players in the US and broadly the geopolitical West, which would otherwise be happy to be doing the same thing, rolling out 5G and unveiling their new technologies. And obviously, part of the security concerns with technologies, I think they are huge and they matter to the extent that where you control technology, you control knowledge and you control the use of those technologies. So it might be just a worry more than a real issue, but also an issue of business competition and political competition. And because Huawei is partly a government-owned company, but I don't think that it's owned by the government. Makes really a big difference. What is key is that this is a company that has been able to compete at far much better, far much affordable technological terms in different parts of the world than the technology companies from the West.
Finally, let's look at the issue around the oil situation. Obviously, Saudi is going to be continuing the oil and gas supplies to China. How does that play out regarding the West now, where we're hearing that there's shortages of oil in the West as well, oil and gas, due to the war in the Ukraine? Is it going to have a huge impact at all? And is it going to kind of, shift the balance of power in some way or the other between East and West?
It's a very important and a very interesting question. I'm not sure what will potentially happen in the long term. I also don't think that Saudi Arabia and much of the Arab world is saying that we are going to be supplying oil to China and then we'll stop supplying the West and particularly the US. I think that obviously the US will try to lean on Saudi Arabia to continue to negotiate an increased production of oil that will allow the Saudis and other players in the GCC countries to eventually increase the production. I also think that there will be urgent concerns in the geopolitical global West, so Western countries in general, to continue to focus at alternative sources of energy and not to only strictly rely on the traditional sources of energy, including the Arab countries.
Okay, Gideon, that's where we leave it for this morning. Thank you indeed, as always, for your deep insights into the issue around the United States. You are a research associate at the African Center for the Study of the US at Wits University. Thank you, and not sure if I'm going to talk with you again for the rest of the year. If not, then a wonderful and safe festive to you and your dear family.
Thank you so much, and happy Christmas and New Year to you.
Thank you. It is 8:32 a.m. We are now going to be talking with a sister who was at OR Tambo, and she has had the terribly unpleasant experience of being searched. And once again, it is about the issue of the hijab and Muslim women being targeted at OR Tambo when they appear there with either hijab or niqab. We'll talk with her in a minute or two. Her name is Nadia Jacobs. Please do stand by and do become a part of the conversation. 8:33 News and Views on Salam Media.